I was sort of nervous because I saw the ruins. I didn't know that much about them, and they looked like real ruins to me. That is, they looked like abandoned, decaying, scary buildings, like where little criminals would hang out. So I didn't want to explore the ruins. I wanted to avoid the ruins.
There were no environmental standards back in the time. There were no government agencies overseeing it. But that's just a poor excuse to keep these same practices going.
It can be really dangerous. There's uncovered mine shafts and rusty metal and lots of exciting broken, collapsing things out here, which is kind of an attractant to the kids in the area and adults, and it can be really dangerous. But at the same time, it'd be kind of neat to see it presented in a more preserved light.
Treadwell, trash or treasure? The Treadwell Gold Mine, located in what is now known as Douglas Island in Juneau, Alaska. In its day, it was the largest gold mine in the world. At Treadwell, it took 8.5 tons of ore to produce 1 ounce of gold. Nonetheless, Treadwell was a record-setting mine which produced 3.3 million ounces of gold between the years 1882 and 1922. The Treadwell Mine also supported the town of Treadwell, which housed over 2,000 miners and their families, had an indoor swimming pool, Turkish baths, a clubhouse, and a well-stocked company store which offered exclusive goods, some not even available in the lower 48. Treadwell is responsible for putting Juneau on the map, a city we all know and love as the state capital. The former location of the Treadwell Mine is still in use today as a year-round recreation area. There is a sandy beach and a trail leading through the old Treadwell Mine ruins. The Treadwell Historic Trail goes 2 miles through the damp, dank, temperate rainforest, used by dog walkers, joggers, and hikers who pass by, mostly oblivious to the historic relics moldering in the woods. There are some markers along the trail denoting which buildings stood where, as well as piles of rusty metal scraps, mining equipment, cable drums, railway tracks, and crumbling concrete buildings. This is one of Treadwell's stamp mills. This 5-stamp mill was the first mill brought to Douglas Island in 1882 by John Treadwell to pulverize the ore. The mine eventually had 960 stamps, which pounded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, stopping only for the 4th of July and Christmas. This is where the Treadwell Clubhouse used to be. This building served as a rec center for the miners and their families and housed a large auditorium, library with books and magazines in many languages, and even a bowling alley. This used to be the Treadwell office building. This building held the offices of the mine bosses. Now it is a popular spot for graffiti and a ready-made film set for local filmmakers.
Can't get a very good shot of this. This is the glory hole.
April 17, 1917, an extraordinarily high tide in the Gastineau Channel triggered a cave-in the Treadwell Mine beneath the swimming pool. This was the nail in the coffin for the Treadwell Mine, whose load was already mostly tapped out by this time. Most of the mine workers left Treadwell within days. Walking the historic trail, it looks as though the Treadwell Mine was simply abandoned that day in April of 1917. Today, there is no evidence that any of the mining equipment, chemicals, or buildings have been dismantled or cleaned up in any way. We spoke to Guy Archibald of Southeast Alaska Conservation Council to ask whether the Treadwell ruins posed a public health hazard.
The sandy beach is tailings. That's how it got there. When the Treadwell Mine, which was the largest mine in the world at the time of its operation, its tailings, after the ore was crushed and amalgamated with mercury, and most of the mercury removed and recovered, at first they just dumped them there on what is now Sandy Beach. And then, of course, as the beach grew, they had a railroad track that dumped it further out into the bay, into Gastineau Channel. Well, there are several contaminants that are above the standards. And there are probably about 5 what I would consider troublesome elements that are above those standards, especially in the case of small children whose not only neural systems but immune systems are still developing. Most of the studies would show, unfortunately, that you're probably going to create a worse problem by trying to dig that up and move it and it becoming transportable in the water column and in the ocean than just leaving it there. So in my opinion, I would say just leave it. And I would like to see some warning signs out there, at least some information to the public to say that, hey, this stuff does exist here, use your own judgment.
So we know that we are not in too much danger from Treadwell Mine's chemical legacy. That's a relief. But what is the future of Treadwell?
Yeah, I like the ruins. I think it's important to remember the mining history. And I also think it's important that some other sort of development not take place here. I don't want to see the place substantially altered. I think part of the charm of the place is that the ruins are in place and the vegetation is growing up around it. But I think things should be taken care of, and I don't think, like vandalism and graffiti and stuff that happens should be ignored. I think you need to go in and clean up after that. And I think if any of the machinery that's out and about could be protected, maybe with, I don't know, Rust-Oleum or something, that would be an appropriate thing. I think it's appropriate to have signage about the place. I think that information should be preserved and made available so, that you're out on a casual walk, you might read a sign and pick up a little bit of information and hear about the fact that, there was a whole town here, there was a company store, there was a library, all of that is fascinating. And now you look at it and there's not much left at all. And Douglas isn't, because the people in Douglas won't like this, but Douglas isn't really the center of the local universe like it used to be.